We have a very active pattern ahead over the course of the next 2 weeks, which looks to be 3 winter storms setting up as temperatures slowly start to rebound and moderate from the south to the north for the rest of January, but they look to come right back down again right after that Groundhog Day, starting out west, been pushing into the central US and eventually heading east. So by the time we end that first week of February, much of the lower 48 will be locked into that colder air again. But how do we actually get there? So let's take a look at the Jetstream going forward and set this thing up for you. So currently right now, I want you to pay attention to two things. This little blue line, that is your colder air. That's kind of your cross polar flow. So you'll still have this waves of energy down coming from Canada, pushing down some colder air into the Great Lakes, as well as into portions of the mid-Atlantic and into New England. But we'll also be watching an area of low pressure that looks to develop there in California. And that is going to deepen going into tomorrow and bringing them actually much needed rain showers for Southern California back into Nevada. But that's the system that will slowly get its act together. So it starts off as an upper level low, and then it's going to break off. So at some point, this break off is going to form a cutoff low. When that happens, that's going to be detached from the main system and become more of a very slow mover, right? And so with these slow movers, that's going to take time and build that colder air, but it's also going to be building the energy out west. And eventually, as this thing slides eastbound, by the time we head, say, into Wednesday, it's really going to be amplified back again, because the further it sits and digs, the more energy is going to be able to pull up, as we'll be watching some of that cross-polar flow continue to amplify heading into that Wednesday time frame. I think that's when they'll have kind of a colder air intrusion, especially for those areas across New England. But there is that bowling ball type trough that's looking to set up going into that Thursday, especially into Friday time frame. We could be looking at a pretty significant system with very heavy rain spreading into Texas, as well as into Louisiana, back into Arkansas. Some of this actually could turn severe. We would likely have snow starting to fly in West Texas, there into New Mexico, back into Colorado. This would likely swing up into the Texas Panhandle. So it's looked to be a very active day across the southern plains for that Thursday and Friday, and that continues to lift northeast. So now we're talking heavy snows into Oklahoma by then, heading into Kansas, back through Missouri. This would likely swing across Iowa, getting into Wisconsin. And as soon as you think that's done, we have yet another system is going to be waiting in the wings. And now as we head towards that Groundhog Day, we're going to be starting to see some of that colder air starting to come back down from Alaska again through British Columbia back into our western regions, as we'll start to see another little buckle in the jet stream start to occur, with a secondary low pressure likely to form as well. So that would bring more snows back into the Four Corners regions, back into New Mexico, and yet another area of low pressure going into, say, the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma again, into Kansas, back into Missouri. This one would likely have a little bit more colder air, so it's going to be probably a little bit further south than the first one. But as soon as you think that's done, we have yet another one that's going to be waiting in the wings from that one, another area of low pressure setting up there in California, and that is going to be slingshotting across the west into the central US. So it looks to be 3 winter storms likely unfolding over the next 2 weeks. So here we are in the temperature front. So this is this morning. This is Saturday, January the 25th, and you can definitely see we've been in that colder air, right? I mean, so much of the southern states still have feeling the effects of that Arctic air, and it's going to be slowly rebounding. But you're definitely still cold this morning. But those temperatures are slowly going to start to retreat as we get deeper into the weekend, especially or into early next week for those areas across the southeast. But we'll be watching those two features, right? We'll be watching the Clipper system that's going to be buckling the jet stream. So that's likely going to be building some pretty cold air mass back into New England. These temperatures are going to be dropping well below zero up there into upstate New York, getting into Vermont and New Hampshire and back into Maine, with their kind of like mini polar vortex coming down the pike. Is those temperatures are definitely going to be on the colder side, but we'll be watching this upper level low, right? This cutoff low that's going to be trapped, and that's also going to be deepening. So we're going to be looking at a chilly rain unfolding Wednesday, Thursday into Friday for much of Texas and the southern plains, Louisiana, back into Arkansas. Then we're talking it's cold enough to snow there into West Texas, to New Mexico, back into the panhandle of Texas, and that would likely swing northeast bound as you're locked into that colder anomalies as you flip the calendar heading into that February 1st time frame. And if that continues to move northbound, that's going to be dropping some heavier snows within the path. But there's the colder air that's going to be coming down from Alaska by the time we head into that Groundhog Day, that February the 2nd time frame. And it definitely gets colder and colder. So starts to warm up from the southeast, starts to, after that Clipper system comes back through, we'll start to warm up in across the northeast, but the cold air comes back with a vengeance coming out of Alaska back into the British Columbia and hits our western states with very cold air mass coming down the pike. That will also link up with that secondary winter storm that will likely set up by then. So we're looking at more colder air coming back into much of the western regions and eventually getting into the central U.S. by the time we head into that February the 4th time frame, with much colder air coming back in the picture. And like I mentioned, that will link up with that potential other secondary winter storms. And it just reloads, right? This pattern just continues with that third system likely forming by then. So yes, much colder air is definitely going to be on the table as temperatures look to rebound and come back with that Arctic air mass. So let's take a look at the overall surface map where we are right now this morning. So there's that blue line up north, right? You got the little Clipper system. So you're still opening the door for some of those lake effect snows up here and across the Great Lakes, as well as into New England during the day on tomorrow. But we'll be watching this low pressure center forming in Southern California. Yes, they need the rain, folks. They desperately need the rain, but unfortunately it comes in with potentially a lot of rain. I mean, a lot of rain for them is like an inch and a half, and some of these areas could. So that could propagate mudslides. That's the last thing they need. But unfortunately, they're going to be getting some precipitation with that, and some of that could be some heavy precipitation and likely snow there into Nevada. Actually, much needed precipitation in there in the Las Vegas region. And that will continue to move across. So we'll have this mini cold front that comes down Saturday night into Sunday. That will kind of stall down there in South Texas into Louisiana. So we're likely unfolding some heavier rains moving back in the picture, say Houston, areas of Shreveport, getting into that Lake Charles region. And as this continues to move through, we'll be watching that Clipper system to the north, right? So that'll spread some snow showers in its wake. That'll be during the day on Tuesday, as we'll be waiting for this upper level low. That's this cutoff low that's going to be taking its sweet time. And that's pretty much the nature. At some point, they kind of even stall out down up there into the desert Southwest. But once they get on the move, and finally they will, probably likely on Wednesday night heading into Thursday, that's when we'll have greater forcing come back in the picture through Texas. That's when we'll be looking at some heavier rains, if not even some flooding rains. Austin, San Antonio, the Houston area. And then out west, we'll be looking at for some heavier snows back into Flagstaff, into New Mexico, Santa Fe region. And then we'll be looking at a transfer to some snow there into far west Texas, especially in the panhandle of Texas, as much of Texas is just locked under that cutoff low. By then we'll also have a secondary surface low, so it gets really active, and I think that's when we'll likely could possibly see some severe storms in East Texas and Louisiana. By then we'll have heavy snow break out in the Texas panhandle, and even at some point we could be increasing the winds with even some blizzard-like conditions possibly lifting as that low pressure center continues to lift northeast and creates that kind of shrimp-like look. And so as this low deepens, that's when we're probably a little bit more capable of maybe transferring this into some blizzard-like conditions as heavy snow falls into Kansas, into Nebraska, back into Missouri, getting up there into Missouri as well as into Iowa, right? Iowa, you've been missing out on the snow. You're going to be locked and loaded with these next couple of systems that will likely swing into the Dakotas through Minnesota and eventually head into Wisconsin, as you'll start to get the heavier rains, and that squall line will be down for the deep south. But look what happens west, right? That's your secondary system. We'll bring more rain back in the picture for California, more rain for Arizona, the hot snow in the higher elevations, Flagstaff, even maybe Tucson might get in the action by then to get some snow. That moves to Colorado, back into New Mexico, and again, another surge of colder air comes in from the northwest down to the southeast. This would likely be even a little bit further south by then than what the models are actually showing right now, which just kind of gives you an idea of that secondary storm track would put it right in line through Kansas and dip it a little bit further south. So now we're talking areas of northern Illinois would likely be in the path of this one. And then as soon as you think that's done, we'll have another one. Because look, that's back again. We're back to a 1046 Arctic high pressure there into Texas again. As you know, some of that colder air will be spreading all the way down into the deep south, and that will likely set up another potential third winter storm as that taps into some of that colder air mass again and some of the same places. So let's look at the GFS. This is a little bit different setup with a little bit discrepancies. Obviously, if we get that second system with some of that colder air coming in, but nonetheless, we've got the Clipper system, right? We got the Clipper system for the Northeast. We'll have the low pressure center for Southern California. We'll have the rain further south into Mississippi, there in Alabama, into South Texas. And then that rain will spread heading into, with that cutoff low, deepens on Wednesday, heading into Thursday. Likely some of that heavier snows will likely break out over New Mexico, getting into far western Texas, into the panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Heavy rain pushing further south. We'll have the snow with that first system, probably pushing potentially some ice moving through Ohio, back in Indiana. Then there's that second system that comes through, right? We'll have that second system that comes through, dropping more rain for the Southwest and more snow for the Intermountain West and the Four Corners regions, and back into Texas again, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas. I mean, this just pattern is really ripe for winter weather activity coming up for the next 2 weeks. And again, as soon as that moves through, this one's a little bit further south, right? That's why I showed you the little bit of discrepancies. This pulls it a little bit further south, seeing the colder air by then because it's February the 5th. Right? February the 5th, we'll have more cold air pulling in from that northwest flow, and some of that could be all snow by then into Pennsylvania, back in New Jersey, getting into the Northeast. And then again, as soon as you think that's done, we'll have that other system come in and spreading more wintry precipitation for the middle part of the country. So overall, that's how we get to this, right? I know a lot of moving parts of where we are now and where we're going to be even 2 weeks from now, as looks to be a very active pattern with winter storms really setting up, because February is definitely a cold month, and it's also one of the snowiest months of the season. So I'll definitely be here to keep you well ahead of the storm. I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch my next update while I protect you before and after the storm.